Okay, welcome to Office Hours. The first thing I'm going to talk about is homework 3. There was a lot of confusion on how to do the permalink part, which is mostly my fault. So I will explain what I intended for you to do using this handy dandy whiteboard. Okay, so the first thing you need to do when you store an object, so you're going to make a post, and it's going to look something like this. You're going to be making this post object, and it has a title and some contents. I think that was it, but that's not the important part. Most of you figured this out. When you put the post in the database in Google App Engine, you use the put command to do so. That actually stores the post in the database. And once you've stored it in the database, that's when Google App Engine assigns that post an ID. You can also include an ID in this constructor here when you build it, but generally it's best just to let the database do it itself, because otherwise you have to keep track of which IDs you've used, which ones you haven't used, that sort of thing. So we'll let Google set the ID. We'll put it in the database. And then, so what we need to do is redirect the user to the permalink page for that post. And by permalink, I just mean link to that post. So we need to get this post ID. The way you do that is you can say p.key. And key is Google App Engine's full kind of representation of this object. And this is a whole long string. And you can turn this into an integer by calling ID on it. So this is the integer representation of that post. And we'll convert it into a stir. Pardon my indentation here. And we'll assign this to a variable. And what we'll do then is we'll redirect the user to a URL with this variable in it. It'll look something like this. And we're going to use our string substitutions to include a little string there. And this should redirect the user to /blog/ the ID of this post. So that's the first part of the problem. The key thing here that you need to know is how to get the idea of a post you just submitted. Now, let me erase this. And then the second part of this problem is how do you actually look up that blog post? Now you've got your URL mappers. All the URL mappers that we've done in the class are basically static URLs. They have the format of something like, remember these are just a bunch of tuples at the bottom of that file. It might look like, /blog, and this maps to a handler that just draws a blog. In my code, I think it's just called main page, which is the Google, the default for that first one. Now, what we want to do is we want to make a special one for linking to permalinks. These strings here that represent the URL are not just strings. They're actually regular expressions. We had some regular expressions in Unit 2 when we were validating usernames and passwords and that sort of thing. Well, what we want to have here is a regular expression to capture a URL with an integer after it. And that looks something like this. So this is all just normal string. In a regular expression, you can just have anything that's just kind of regular text just matches that text exactly. Now, after here, we use parentheses to basically say whatever goes in here will be passed as a parameter to our handler function. And we can do something like this, square bracket 0 through 9, square bracket plus. And what this means is the square brackets say match any character between these square brackets. And you can use ranges like this. So this basically says find any numbers 0 through 9, and the plus means find one or more of them. So this will basically match any URL that starts with /blog/ and then any number. And we'll map that to some handler for our permalink page, which I think in my code I may have called post handler. But you can call that whatever you want. Now, so that's step 2, is basically do this URL handler. And may I have the eraser, please? And then we'll talk about step 3, which is fairly straightforward. There we go. You have your handler, so we'll have something that looks like this. And this inherits from the web app 2 handler or the global handler, whichever you're using. And in here you'll have a function that looks something like this, def get. This handles get requests. Now normally this just takes one parameter called self. In this case, we had parentheses in the URL mapper, which means it's going to match whatever's in those parentheses and pass it as a parameter into here. So in this case, it's going to be our post ID. One quick thing to note, I never call variables ID in Python because ID is actually a function, and it's a reserved function, and it's really easy to create really subtle bugs if you start using the word ID. So all my variables that refer to IDs always are something underscore ID. So now what we want to do is get our post out of the database. In App Engine, this just looks something like this. P equals post. This is our class that we defined. That's the actual data model. And you can say get by ID, post ID. And that'll do a database query to look up the post with this ID out of the database. And then all you need to do is say if P, and then you can render it however you plan on doing that. And if P doesn't exist, you can just return a 404. So that's how you do the permalink portion of the homework. I hope you guys managed to get all this working. I'm sorry, I probably should have covered get by ID in the lecture, but that's the fun of teaching for the first time. So good luck, everybody, and thanks for sticking with us so far.